The Minnesota Wild and the Florida Panthers continue to cruise through their schedules. And despite all of the success, these are two different teams than the last time they squared off. We preview tonight's matchup against Florida today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you for making both Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, both shows are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers, we catch up with both the Wild and the Panthers to see where they are at since the last time these two teams matched up. And we will look at tonight's big matchup at the XL Energy Center. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, joined by the host of Locked on Florida Panthers, Armando Velez. What's happening?
Great to get together again, Seth, with you once again. We got together in the off season. We got together in November to recap the game, and this time around, this is a makeup game from when these two teams were supposed to play back in December. Of course, Panthers had their COVID issues. They were one of the first teams to get shut down in all of the league. I think they were the third or fourth shortly after everybody. But this is completely different teams for both the Florida Panthers and the Minnesota Wild as they head into this matchup between two teams who just score at will. And I was listening to Michael Russo's podcast today with Andrew Burnett, and I just found out the Minnesota Wild's record against the Eastern Conference, and their only regulation loss came in that November matchup against the Florida Panthers. But a lot has changed since. And I want to ask, first of all, about the duo of Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello. I believe that Zuccarello has multi-point games in 9 out of their last 12. Kaprizov is now just 7 points off the NHL point lead. I was looking at the list today. Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid both have a point tonight for the Edmonton Oilers, so they're now ahead in the race for the Art Ross. But talk about that duo and how they've just taken this team and taken the leadership of this team to carry them to where they are.
You know, it's funny for me, first and foremost, that we got to see Kirill Kaprizov in his run to the Calder Trophy last year and got to get to this season and say somehow he's going to outdo it. And he already has more points this year than he had all of last season. But you bring up an important point in that Matt Zuccarello is having a career season himself. The chemistry that those two have on that top line is just something that you really don't see throughout the NHL. Two guys that just, they know where the other is going to be at pretty much all times. I think the thing that really sets this duo apart, and this is something that the Wild have kind of done more of as the season has gone on, is if you look at it, you could almost call Kirill Kaprizov the center for that top line because of how much he handles the puck. I know Ryan Hartman is the one that takes the faceoffs, but Kaprizov handles the puck so much and, is either trying to score himself or set up his line mates, that he is basically just playing as a center at this point. His vision on the ice, his ability to just make those insane passes is only matched by Matt Zuccarello's ability to do the exact same thing. And so you have this triangle of guys that have just developed this insane level of chemistry. And I didn't think it was possible coming into the season, but it seems like Kirill is he's getting stronger as the season goes on, and he's on pace to do something that you do not see associated with the Minnesota Wild ever, which is a 100-point season. And is he going to get there? Absolutely. It's so refreshing to see, and it's amazing to me that you can have a guy that won the Calder and is just continuing to get better as he goes.
Yeah, and it's crazy because as somebody who doesn't watch the Minnesota Wild on a day in and day out basis, and seeing that he only played in the NHL for one season, and then hearing the contract demands that Kirill Kaprizov wanted in the offseason, I was like, I don't know if I want to pay this guy the dollars that he got after one season in the NHL. And that's a risk from the front office, but also Kaprizov betting on himself. And it's paid off from Kaprizov's end, and he's the leader now on this team. I know he's not the captain. I know Jared Spurgeon is the captain, but Kaprizov is pretty much the leader of that team, the heart and soul really of that team. And it's funny because even now it's like expected of Kirill Kaprizov that the conversation's not there as much around NHL circles like it was last season. I mean, he took the league by storm last year, and the conversation now is, oh, this is just what we expect out of Kirill Kaprizov. But just an incredible player to watch. He scored the goal in their last matchup against the Florida Panthers, which was a strange game. The Aaron Ekblad had a beautiful pass to Owen Tippett, gets one, and then the Wild, that was a point in time where they pulled the goalie and they get 2 6-on-5 goals. The Florida Panthers do get an empty netter, but then the Wild make it interesting with like 20 something seconds left and made it a lot closer than it should have at the end. And I was telling my listeners yesterday how this is a completely different Minnesota Wild team that we saw back in November. And though the Minnesota Wild are still top 5 in the NHL in shots on goal allowed, I've seen that the goalie play has really improved for Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kahkonen. I actually decided to do a split of what the beginning of the season to November 22nd when the Wild made their Florida swing, and November 22nd to now. I see that the numbers for Kaapo Kahkonen were not good in his four games. 870 save percentage, 3.330. Same thing with Cam Talbot, 905, 2.95. But then I see also the turnaround since then. And the numbers for Cam Talbot, he made the All-Star team this year, 919 with a 278 goals against average. But also Kaapo Kahkonen, a draft pick for the Minnesota Wild, 933 and a 2.30 goals against average. And I've seen that he's come in relief a few times for the Minnesota Wild. So I got to ask you, Seth, is there a goalie controversy in Minnesota right now?
I don't know if I would go so far as to say a goalie controversy. I think what we're seeing is, and this is something that I think both myself and the other podcasts that cover the Minnesota Wild have really been clamoring for, is just a much more even spread of the starts. I think we saw Cam Talbot get so many early on, and that led to a lot of 5-4 games, a lot of 4-3 games, and I think when the Wild gave Kaapo an opportunity to get a few starts with Talbot out, to get his confidence up, now they didn't just go back to what they were doing early in the season, which was just Talbot gets all of them. I think it's led to both goalies feeling like they really have an opportunity to help this team this year, and they really have an opportunity to both leave their mark on what this team has done. And, these guys are doing this without a plethora of really critical defensemen. We've seen Matt Dumba out of the lineup for the last couple of games. Sounds like that's probably going to be a couple-week injury. Jared Spurgeon has been out. Jonas Brodin has been out. And they have really stepped up and helped shoulder some of that load because, I mean, let's be honest. You could make Devin Dubnyk now look good behind Brodin, Spurgeon, and Dumba when they're all out on the ice. But I think this team just views that it has two good goalies that can step in and can start any given night and can give them a great chance to win. And it's refreshing compared to what we've had in the past, which is ride one goalie until they break down at the end of the year. And then when we lose in the first round of the playoffs, we're like, what happens? We were so good all the way through the regular season, and then the goalie wore down. So they've avoided that, and I think as a result, they have two confident goalies that can start against anybody.
Yeah, and seeing just the splits between, like I said, the beginning of the season to November 22nd and then November 22nd on, Cam Talbot getting 14 of the starts to Kahkonen's 4, and then 15 starts for Talbot to Kahkonen's 12. So now Talbot's getting more of a little bit of a rest, and so now he's more refreshed, as you said, as they go towards the playoffs. But one more question regarding the Minnesota Wild is a 2019 first round draft pick, number 12 overall, in Matthew Boldi. A lot of the talk is about Kaprizov and Zuccarello, but Matt Boldy, 14 points in 13 games. How much of a treat has it been to watch him play?
Oh, he's been sensational. And Boldy's done two things. He himself has been really good, and he has helped Kevin Fiala. Kevin Fiala was playing on a line with Victor Rask and Freddie Gaudreau, two guys that don't really offer you a lot offensively, more so defense inclined, which was the exact opposite of the kind of player that Kevin Fiala is. And as soon as Boldy went onto that line, it took off. And we're seeing a chemistry level that is similar to Kaprizov and Zuccarello on that top pairing, which has led to this second line being super dominant since they got put together 13 games ago. Boldy is kind of asserting himself in the Calder Trophy race, despite the fact that he really has not played a ton of games compared to everybody else. But at the end of the day, it is deep into this team tremendously because you have two dominant scoring lines. You have a third line that can be used to try to counter the top line of the opponent. And you have a fourth line that can be a nice change of pace with pure speed that you can deploy whenever you need to just kind of give the other team a different look. So Boldy has been great by himself, but he also has just turned this team into a much deeper unit by being able to be plugged into that second line and just go with it.
Yeah, and it's great that the Minnesota Wild do have that balance on multiple lines, and the Florida Panthers are definitely in the same boat where they have multiple scoring on multiple places. But we're going to flip the script where Seth is going to ask me about the Florida Panthers in the next segment. But first, we're going to tell you all about Built Bar. And this is the time of year where I've given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallow-y. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy, cinnamony, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. These are going to be your new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, Puffs included. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bar with these. They're better. The typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to BuiltBar.com and scroll down to the macros chart, and you'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, and low carb. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Continuing today's crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers. And again, thank you for making both shows your first listen every day. When you are finished listening to today's crossover episode, make sure to swing over to Olympic Hockey Daily, which is part of the Locked On NHL podcast, a bonus podcast covering everything going on in Beijing. You can find it on the Locked On NHL podcast feed. Olympic Hockey Daily and the Locked On NHL podcast are free wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's talk some Florida Panthers now as gearing up for tonight's matchup between the Wilds and the Florida Panthers. And Armando, the last time these two teams played, I know one of the things that I was looking at was just marveling at the center depth for the Panthers. Obviously, Sam Reinhart. You've got Alexander Barkov, but some other guys have really stepped up and been bright spots for this team. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't expect to see Jonathan Huberdeau up near the top of the leaderboard in terms of points on the season. Was that a surprise for the Panthers, or is it just another portion of what makes this such a dangerous and depth-filled, shout out Anson Carter, team?
And it's crazy because I'm not surprised that Jonathan Huberdeau is at least in the top 10 in points when it comes to the NHL, but number one or number two, which right now he's behind McDavid and Draisaitl, is just a product of what he has been able to do in the offseason, he's a great follow on Instagram, by the way. For anyone who wants to follow Jonathan Huberdeau, he's always posting his workout videos. And I want to mention Andrew Burnett, going back to his appearance on Michael Russo's Straight from the Source podcast that I listened to today, who used to write for the Florida Panthers as well. And Andrew Burnett talked about how Huberdeau is going back into the lab and just continuing to work on his body. And Andrew Burnett talks about how one of the most underrated qualities about Jonathan Huberdeau is his puck deception, and how he's able to deceive defenders into thinking that he's going one way when he's going to make a pass going the other way. And just his ice vision to set up his teammates has just been incredible. For the most part, in the last few weeks of the season before heading into the Olympic break, he was paired with Sam Bennett at center and Anthony Duclair on the right wing. Now he has Noel Acciari, who was now in practice as the second line. For the last game, it was Owen Tippett. So we might see Noel Acciari in his first game this season for the Florida Panthers after getting injured in the preseason. So a possible luxury for the Florida Panthers. Excuse me, Patrick Hornquist on the second line. So Noel Acciari might be on the fourth line come Friday night. So Patrick Hornquist on that second line for the Panthers, when he's played mostly on the fourth, it's only going to reap more benefits. And Patrick Hornquist is healthy too, after missing most of the last few weeks of the season before the Olympic break. And it's just a testament of what Jonathan Huberdeau has done in the offseason, and it's really paying off for this Florida Panthers team.
Armando, the other thing that I look at with the Panthers as I gloss up and down their schedule is, much like the Minnesota Wild, the Panthers a good team at avoiding losing streaks. I see just 3 of 2 games or more so far on the season. What, in your assessment, has been some of the big keys for the Panthers being able to avoid losses snowballing into 2, 3, 4-game losing streaks?
It comes down to setting the tone early for the most part, and especially at home where they've only lost 3 times. And even last season, in their shortened 56-game season, they only had 2 3-game losing streaks all year. That's it. No more than 3 all of last year. And the biggest losing streak that I can remember on the top of my head is mid-December, where they lost to Colorado, and then they came home against Ottawa and then LA right before their COVID shutdown. And the LA game, that was a game that was one to forget because they could only dress 16 skaters due to COVID. And the next game was supposed to be against Minnesota. So, and it was supposed to be a Jonas Johansson start as well, because Bob apparently got COVID as well. So it would have been a really hard game for this Florida Panthers team to play. But setting the tone early and also keeping leads. As far as goal differential, the third period is their best period when it comes to that. And heading into the third period as well, if they're leading in the third period, you know how many games the Florida Panthers have lost when having a lead going into the third period? Do you want to take a guess, Seth?
I'm going to guess it's a very low number. I'm going to say 2.
0. They haven't lost a single game with a lead going into the third period this season. So it really comes down to if they have a lead, they haven't let down at all this season.
The final one that I want to ask before we hop in and start kind of going through the keys to this matchup. Obviously, the Panthers have been near the top of the standings the whole season. They're rolling along, and one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Is there anything with the Panthers that concerns you, even a little bit, in what will hopefully be a lengthy playoff run for Florida?
It doesn't matter when they go up against the high quality goaltenders, the elite of the elite goaltenders, because scoring is great. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes when it comes to playoff hockey, the game slows down in the playoffs, and they found a way to win their last game against the Carolina Hurricanes after having multiple deficits in their game. They were down 1-0, and then they were down 2-1, and they found a way to get a goal within the last minute of the game. They found a way to win that one, and only twice on the road this season have the Florida Panthers won a game when their opposition scores first. Only 2 times have they won this season with that. The first one was against Vancouver, and then the last one was just 2 nights ago against Carolina. So it's just been about defending on your end as well, because the goals against for the Florida Panthers, it's better. It's better than it was the last 2 years, but it's still not what fans and people who cover this team want it to be. And going back to that conversation once again to Andrew Brunette and Michael Russo, their third time I'm referencing that on this show, that just Andrew Brunette talked about how there doesn't need to be a lot of pressure on Sergei Bobrovsky to be that guy that he was in Columbus, that even though last game specifically that the save percentage might not look good for Sergei Bobrovsky in single game save percentage in that one, that he made the key saves when he needed to. And of course, there was that beautiful save by Lucas Carlson right in front of the net when Bob was out of position. But hey, you need your defenders to do that from time to time. But it's just really about how will this team fare in low scoring affairs, really, when they're not, when the offense does get dry, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Okay. And I can shout out, I saw that save. I can't figure out how that happened. And, Brandon Duhaime had a save like that, although his was on the ice, so not nearly as many skill points as the one that you referenced. But, hey, love to see other players helping the goalie out. That's what we like. So
South Florida native Brandon Duhaime.
Yeah, he'll play a factor in the game here this evening. We'll talk X's and O's with the Panthers and Wild set to square off here tonight. After this, here on this crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where to find the next fired coach and where they will land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to Olympic coverage and information. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. You can find it all at BetOnline, where the game starts. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild and Locked On Florida Panthers. Again, thank you for making both shows your first listen every day. Make sure to throw a subscribe to both Locked On Florida Panthers and Locked On Wild on YouTube, as well as on social media as well, ahead of tonight's game. And Armando, the matchup, this is going to be a really fun one because, you talk about Florida being a huge home field advantage for the Panthers. The XL Energy Center is becoming that for the Minnesota Wild. So you talk about one team getting off to a good start compared to the other, setting the tone early. Let's talk about that a little bit. In just, have you seen the Panthers on the road be able to do that nearly as much as they have at home?
No, nowhere near. And more times than not on the road, they have scored first, but again, when they haven't, it has been hard for them to get back into games and for them to play from behind. But I'm seeing the Minnesota Wild's home record. My goodness, 16-3-1, almost identical to what the Florida Panthers have done on their home ice, just without that one overtime loss that the Minnesota Wild have at home. And it's going to be it's going to be really tough for the Florida Panthers as they get this game on in the state of hockey. And man, it's going to be a tough challenge for sure. And I just don't know. I just don't know where to go with this one as far as predicting a result. But I predicted an overtime loss against the Carolina Hurricanes in Wednesday's matchup when I did my crossover with Jared Ellis. But I did watch that game between the Minnesota Wild and the Carolina Hurricanes as well just last week. And my goodness, the way that the Minnesota Wild just poured on sometimes, even though that was a close game for Wild and Hurricanes, I'm going to say that the Wild come out with a win in this one in regulation against the Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers did get a regulation win against the Wild back in November, but I do think that the role that the Minnesota Wild are on, 8-2-0 in their last 10, the turnaround really happened after that Florida trip. You mentioned winning streaks for this Minnesota Wild team. They went on an 8-game winning streak at one point. I know there was a 4-game losing streak at one point and then another losing streak there, but they also counter it with long winning streaks that kept this team afloat. And they're likely not going to catch Colorado, but still, you're going to get at least home ice advantage more than likely in round one of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, and that 16-3-1 is definitely a benefit that the Minnesota Wild have really found themselves in. So I'm going to predict a regulation loss by the Minnesota Wild. And with these two teams being high scoring teams, I'm going to say it's going to be a 4-3 final in favor of Minnesota.
I'm going to actually take the score that this first round was 5-4, and I'm going to say that that'll be the final in tonight's contest. So we'll get identical 5-4 scores, but I think the Wild do come out on top because I did get the sense in the loss to the Winnipeg Jets that the Wild were maybe looking a little too far ahead on the schedule to tonight's matchup. And with what the Jets were able to do to them, really only the second time that a team has been able to slow down both the Kaprizov line and the Fiala line since they were constructed. It's that I think is what has made this team tick so much, is that you try to slow down the Kaprizov line, that Fiala line will just get you. You try to slow down the Fiala line, the Kaprizov line will just get you. And
pick your poison.
Exactly. And I think this team is just, they're going to be hungry to avenge that loss early on in the season, and they're going to be hungry to move on from the loss to Winnipeg. I think it could be a similar replica to what we saw against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where the Wild get out to a huge lead and Florida comes back and the Wild have to kind of eke out a 1-goal win. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I am a little concerned because the Wild have one of the worst special teams units at home this season, which is just, it's bizarre. They're near the bottom of the league, but the power play has been better. From a Florida perspective, power play, penalty kill, are those still chugging right along for the Panthers, or have we seen a little bit of a dip? Either way, in their performance here recently.
They're atrocious in December, and I referenced it on the show that they were 29th in the NHL in the month of December. And then their record-setting scoring month where they got 74 goals, the most in the NHL in the last 25 seasons. Their power play percentage was 4th in all of the NHL in that one. So it's a little bit of a work in progress. And so far in their 2 February games, their one against the New York Rangers and then one against Carolina Hurricanes, they haven't gotten a single power play goal. But hey, this is an abbreviated month with the Olympic break going on. So hard to judge where the power play is going to be at once February is wrapped up. But it's definitely been better than what it was the last few months of the season. And it's resulting in more wins on the road as well, because they were 500 as well going into their 2-game trip in Dallas and Carolina just last January. And that was the real change in momentum in their season on the road. And a lot of that has to do with how they perform on special teams. And got to give credit to their special teams unit for Wednesday's performance as well, not allowing a power play goal, because the Carolina Hurricanes just are great on both special team units, while the Florida Panthers are just average in special teams. But hey, when it comes to playoff hockey, the best of a team is going to be how they perform on 5-on-5, and the Florida Panthers are one of those teams that are one of the best on 5-on-5. And if they can get the power play going, even better, and that's a bonus for them. And we saw progress in January. So still a little bit hard to judge what they're doing in February so far with only 2 games played.
It's all going to add up to what should be a just unbelievable matchup between these two teams, and I'm full send on seeing a playoff series between these two, hopefully down the line. Which, if you think about it, there's only one way that would happen. But, we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to get ahead of myself, because there's still Colorado, Vegas, Calgary, all those other teams in the West to get through before that would happen.
Tampa, Toronto, Carolina, New York Rangers, Pittsburgh Penguins, possibly on the other side of the East. Yeah, and Andrew Burnett against his former team. Oh, the storylines that would be in the NHL.
That would be great. It's just nice to be part of the crew of the good teams in the NHL this year, and both of these teams are. So it should be a great matchup here tonight. That, I think, is going to wrap it up here for today's episode. The crossover Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers. So now that your first listen of the day is done, make sure you head over to Locked on NHL to get the full recap on everything going on throughout the National Hockey League from your favorite Locked on NHL hosts. Locked on NHL is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, just like both of these shows. Make sure to find them, follow them, and keep up to date with both squads throughout the rest of the season. Make sure to give us a follow on social media as well. And you can find new episodes every Monday through Friday of both Locked on Wild and Locked on Florida Panthers as part of the Locked on Podcast Network.